is the leader of Silence is Violence, but more importantly, she is a member of the Gun Violence Reduction Task Force that I formed some time ago. Really, in 2019, the final report was submitted to me. And and this young man, I know you heard from him previously or most recently last week, standing with our New Orleans Police Department chief. But Hakeem Schiff is our training supervisor for Cure Violence. You'll hear more about Cure Violence throughout this press conference, but this is our team. This is my team who keeps me focused every single day on gun violence, but in ways that we can prevent it in our community. This has been literally 3 years in the making, and it is also a fulfillment of a promise that I made as mayor and mayor-elect, and then being inaugurated mayor in May of 2018, almost 3 years ago. But my Forward Together transition team recommended that we create a task force to study the city's gun violence problem as a whole and think holistically and creatively, and pretty much tying in innovation and research in our approach. So on my first day in office, I created the Gun Violence Reduction Task Force. And that work culminated into a report that was submitted to me in August of 2019. And their key recommendation at that time was to create a body whose job is to coordinate, fund, and evaluate public health in terms of gun violence reduction and looking at interventions as well as outcomes. Now, as a New Orleans City Council member, right in 2013, I issued an op-ed and really framing gun violence as a public health issue. And it requires a response, just as we've even demonstrated dealing with COVID-19 in this pandemic. So even though New Orleans has had over 100 murders annually since the 70s, no other administration has truly invested this much time, effort, but really building the infrastructure to focus on this problem for the long haul. It is not a quick fix at all, but we know that if we can really work on changing the way that we think about gun violence, then ultimately behaviors will also follow. We're going to implement a public health intervention, and it's a three-pronged process is what I say. It includes Cure Violence, you'll hear more on that, CEO Works, the Jumpstart program, in addition to the Barber and Beautician Collective that we launched several weeks ago. And I had an opportunity to visit the collective this morning on their most recent session for this week, and it was not only very exciting, but it gave me, just solidified my hope in our people, but hope in the future of this city by really focusing on how we as individuals can identify issues, conflicts, and work to address them, but in a manner that we understand the messenger matters and who that messenger is that's elevating the issue as well as the concern, but working to meet our people where they are so that they can become more productive in society. But doing so is changing the way that they think, and in turn will change their behavior, just as we saw moving through this pandemic. So we're going to manage the Gun Violence Policy Lab, and this is in partnership with Tulane University School of Public Health and their professional advancement to rigorously study gun violence in our community, in our city, and evaluate the effectiveness of our intervention. So it's not just saying what you're going to do, but really putting in measures to measure what you do, to hold ourselves accountable every step of the way. As we said this morning, we're not afraid to try new things, but we want to make sure that they're also effective. And as we see the progress that demonstrates effectiveness, we're going to continue to support and scale. If we see something that we're moving in the wrong direction, we're going to pivot, change it up, and move in a much more greater direction. So it's not being afraid to tackle this issue that has plagued our city, plagued society, and what we have seen up close and personal has plagued the United States of America. But I'm now going to ask Mr. Joshua Cox to come forward and really break down our work, as he has just been very instrumental in the research, but also the organizing that's necessary to get us to where we are this afternoon. So with that, I'm going to ask Josh to come forward. All right. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Mayor. My name is Josh Cox, and the mayor's entrusted me. It's been quite an honor to entrust me with the responsibility of stewarding the Gun Violence Reduction Task Force, and ultimately in helping us to get to this moment today. The core thing to remember about the Office of Gun Violence Prevention is that our goal is to prevent violence from occurring through the use of public health interventions. Interventions are going to be the bedrock of what this office does. As the mayor just mentioned, right now we have 4. Hopefully, in the future, we will be expanding that because at the end of the day, social determinants of health often determine behavioral outcomes. And so if we can address as many of the needs of our people as we can, we're confident that we'll be able to see reductions over time in instances of gun violence in our city. The second piece to remember about this office is that, as the mayor mentioned, we are committed to rigorously evaluating not just our interventions, but also gun violence trends in the city overall. It's really easy to just look at a number at the end of a year and say, oh, there were 204 murders this year, or there were 119 murders this year. But to truly understand the impacts and the characteristics and the things that are influencing behavior, we need rigorous academic research. I'm sure it might come as a surprise, but the federal government hasn't funded gun violence research since 1996. And given that this is something that not just impacts New Orleanians in our city, but that, as we see across the country, impacts other cities, we as New Orleans have to take control of our own destiny. And so it is with great excitement that we announce that we will be creating a gun violence prevention policy lab in conjunction with Tulane. And the goal of this will be, number one, every 6 months to offer a report that will be publicly available that outlines not just the actual facts of what happens in terms of gun violence, but that offers more character, helps us understand the ways in which the social determinants of health actually impact the gun violence numbers that we see. And then secondly, also to evaluate whether the interventions we are performing and delivering to the public are actually having their intended outcome. The third piece is funding, right? If interventions are the bedrock of what this office does, the corresponding other piece has to be, how do we scale the amount of money that we have to address the public health needs that we know our people have? Government investments, philanthropic investments, those are great, but the needs of our people are even greater. And so we have been working really hard to, number one, demonstrate that the current cost of the way gun violence operates in our city is expensive. But then number two, we've been working really hard to try to figure out ways that we can bring private sector partners in to help us be partners in solving this problem. And so we look forward over the next couple of weeks to having additional press conferences where we can show off this work. So, Mayor, I believe on your schedule next week is a press conference where we're going to show you the interventions that we've already got in place. So we can show you up close the work that Cure Violence does. We can show you up close the work that CEO Works, which is a transitional employment opportunity for individuals who are returning home from incarceration. We can show you that up close. We can show you the jobs program that we just launched for Opportunity Youth, young people who've been disconnected from work and school. We can show you the Beautician and Barber Collaborative. But aside from doing that next week, we also want to do an additional press conference with our Tulane partners to demonstrate the academic work that is happening in the partnership that's allowing the city to use some of our incredible brain power to help make this problem better. Now, I just walked through the basics of the office and what we're hoping to accomplish, but none of this stuff gets accomplished without great people. And so I want to introduce to you the individual who is going to be the new director of this office on the day-to-day basis. I'll still be leading the strategic vision, but Patrick will be the boots on the ground, actually making sure that these interventions are executed on and doing all the things that are necessary. So, Patrick, go ahead and introduce yourself to the people.
Excuse me. Thank you, Josh. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Josh. I'm so excited to be a part of this work because when we think about how we're going to change and do a transition of stopping the violence in the community, it all begins with self. And I can think back at a moment when I myself was violent. And to be in a position to be a director of gun violence prevention, I have to look at what caused me to make the changes in my life. And so when you have someone who spent 13 years in prison, now leading the work that's going to be able to get into the community to make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable because we have a responsibility. If we were the ones who did damage, we can be the ones that can repair it. And so I want to be the first one to be on the front line to say it stops here. And accountability begins with everyone that's involved. It shouldn't just be upon the mayor or the police, but what part can we all play in this violence that's taking place in our city? The same way that we attacked the COVID virus and we set up stations where you can get a COVID test or you can find out if you can get a vaccination, why not set up interventions and resources within the community where we can inject new antibodies that can neutralize the safety of our city? Because at the end of the day, what we want is peace in our community. We can't just point fingers where it all came from, but we can get to the final outcome and the solution by coming to the same common denominator, and that's peace and safety in our community. And so I'm excited to lead this work, giving my whole heart and effort, and also personally on behalf of my brother who was killed from gun violence, to make amends with my mother who had to live in the suffrage of not only seeing my brother killed, but also see me become a victim, going to prison. But now I have a son and a daughter, and I'm able to change the context, and I can break that generational cycle of violence because it starts with me. And so I'm just humble for this opportunity, and I just challenge you to come back and see the outcomes. Let's not look at what we're saying, but look at what we're doing. And so to speak to some of the community partnerships that we have, I would like Tamaris Jackson to come and talk about the great work she's doing with Silences Violence.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Mayor Cantrell and Joshua, and all of you who are present. Most of you know me. I'm the Executive Director of Silences Violence. I want to say to you, it brings me great pleasure that this is the first administration in 15 years of my work that has been open and receptive to change and not so stagnant in the plan they had initially. Mayor Cantrell has been accessible, available. She listens. She's open to changing so we can have a better city, a better community, and also a safe space. We all know too well gun violence has plagued this city for a number of years. She's worked tirelessly to make sure that we are safe and that we have resources and opportunities to change the narrative. I've been a member of the Gun Violence Reduction Task Force. We work together collectively to make decisions about what we think will be best for our communities. As you know, I'm on the ground each and every day. Every murder that happens in this city, I respond. And in my response, I'm observant. I see and I hear, I listen. I talk to community members. I share their messaging. Mayor Cantrell has been open and receptive. I don't care if I call her late at night sometimes. She answers, and that's important. That's important that I can talk to her and share with her what the community say they need. So I'm hopeful, I'm encouraged, and I'm supportive of the new prevention program. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Hakim Kashif. I would like to first and foremost thank our Madam Mayor for an opportunity to serve in the capacity of Career Violence. And I want to thank you so much, Mayor, for this opportunity. One of the most important things that we have been doing for the last several months, not just through the barbershop and fellowship, but we have been doing something that is very impactful for the community. And by launching out through Career Violence, we're able to do so many different things. And one of the things that I want to point out this afternoon is that Jeff Bezos, who is the CEO of Amazon, he said, create more than you consume. And what the Office of Gun Violence and Reduction is doing is creating solutions, because we don't want to be consumed by violence. And when we look at the Office of Gun Violence Reduction, we have many facets. And one of the most important things is that not just from the resource level, but also from the level of changing the mindset of young people who are engaged in behavior that we know can be able to be changed. Because the proof is in the research. When we look at the research of gun violence all across America, many clinicians, the public health approach to stopping violence is first to identify we have a problem. Everybody keeps saying we have a problem. But today, we're launching out a plan. And like the mayor said, this is not a show. This is for real. And this is what the community need. We need some impactful and we need meaningful people who have been there before. And just like Patrick, I am one who have really been a part of something of that type of behavior in my community. I lost a brother through gun violence. I did almost 20 years in federal prison. But like they always say, it's not what happened to you yesterday, it's how you deal with it today. And so I am changed. I'm a change agent in my community. And I know that the community need individuals like us, and what the beck and call and the leadership, what Josh Costa is talking about, and what from the academia side of Tulane University. And when you put all this together, this is a solution. We are creating valuable platforms for people to see. And lastly, like the mayor said, this is not a show. It's for real. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And so with that, absolutely, this is a holistic approach. We recognize that it takes all of us, of course, the city, of course, our police department, but in partnership with the community, with the courts, with the DA, the sheriff, everyone has a role to play. Parents, family members, all of us, because it impacts all of us. So with that, Ms. LaToya, I did want to go ahead and sign my executive order of making this official, because no, it's not a show, we got to make it official. And I do recognize that the residents of the city of New Orleans are calling for a different approach and a holistic approach that is rooted in meeting people where they are. And so with that, we've signed the executive order, and Ms. LaToya, I think our work is done today.